We have a number of panel members, and I will just quickly go round and introduce them. We have Winston Duguid, who is our Vice Chair, Sally Davis, Sean Hughes, Mark Roper, Lucy Hodge, Alistair Singleton, Douglas Hounsell. So welcome to those members. May I please ask the emergency evacuation procedure to be read out by Michaela. Thank you.
When the continuous alarm bell sounds, you must evacuate the building by one of the designated exits and proceed to the named assembly point. The designated exits are signposted. Arrangements are in place for the safe evacuation of disabled people.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry I've trumped your apologies for absence and substitutions, but perhaps you could go through those for me as well. Thank you.
Apologies from Councillor Elliott, who's been substituted by Councillor Roper. Apologies from Councillor Furs, who's been substituted by Councillor Hounsell. And apologies from Councillor McPhee.
Thank you, Michaela. Item number 4 is declarations of interest. And may I ask members if they have any declarations of interest? So this is disposable pecuniary interest or other declarable interest on any item of business that will come up in the agenda. I see no hands raised, so we can move on. Urgent business agreed by the chair. There's no urgent business agreed by the chair. Number 6 is public and councillor statements. I don't have any registered, but I understand that Bob Goodman is here and would like to make a statement. And as chair, I am going to allow that. I've looked at the Constitution and the Rule 32 and Rule 33, and I'm going to allow that because of pertinent information that Mr. Goodman may have. Mr. Goodman?
Thank you very much, Chair and Vice Chair.
You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, both of you, for being understanding. I wonder how many of you, having put yourself forward to what is undoubtedly the Council's most important scrutiny panel, in that it includes the Council's commercial estate, have taken the trouble to walk around the estate with a professional surveyor to see the issues that the estate is facing. As many of you may know, my professional career started nearly 50 years ago with what was then the Estate Department of Bath City Council. And as I've said many times, that was then the premier corporate department of any council earnings in the country, pro rata. The problem with reports like this one, which has been submitted to this scrutiny panel, is officers tell you what they want you to hear, not what you need to hear. I recall only too well, as Vice Chairman of this exact scrutiny panel in 2016, on receiving a report by officers from an independent surveyor review of the commercial estate that I had asked for as part of that panel. That report came to the panel was a complete whitewash. I asked for the full report rather than the few snippets which officers were prepared to give to us as elected members. I find this totally unacceptable and propose to the panel that we should be given the whole report and, if necessary, go in closed session. That motion was passed, but to cut a very long story short, I was and still have been refused to see that report, and I urge you all to receive that report to see what actions were proposed. I just feel that that was a complete and flagrant breach of what elected members are there for. The commercial estate has been poorly run for many years under several administrations of different political persuasions.
1 minute.
Who have failed to, is that 1 minute left? Who failed to examine exactly what has been happening. I wonder how many of you have seen the commercial estate report. There's 7 recommendations. Why aren't they already adopted? I will have to skip some now. You may ask, what do I want this panel to do? Well, what I want you to do is look at the commercial estate in its entirety and to have an independent surveyors, firm of surveyors look at this, which are not involved in this council whatsoever. There needs to be a root and branch review of the estates to see where the financial issues lie. It hurts me as a resident, even more as a chartered surveyor, to hear the way fellow professionals in the city speak openly about how poorly this department is being run. I know I will make no few friends with what I've been saying, but I'm afraid it has to be said.
Mr. Goodman, your time is up. Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Right, can I move on to item 7, minutes of the meeting on the 28th of March. Has everybody had an opportunity to look at those? May I have a proposer? Sally Davis, and seconder is Winston. Right. If I can move on now to item number 8. This is the Cabinet member update, and may I invite the Cabinet member for Economic Development and Resources, Councillor Samuel, to give us an update. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll just take these in 3 parts. As far as finance is concerned, the main issue at the moment is I am waiting for the end-of-year outturn for 21-2. I won't get that in terms of accurate figures probably for a few more weeks, but that's the kind of main area that the finance team are working on at the moment to finalise the accounts for last year and our outturn position, which will be reported to the Cabinet as soon as we have it. On economic development, we are about to launch the Milsom Quarter Master Plan next week. And there is a member briefing set up, all member briefings set up, I think, for the week after to take all councillors through what is a very exciting and comprehensive document looking at the future prospects for the northern part of the city, roughly from Southgate up to George Street. So that's a very important piece of work. I won't say too much more about that because that'll be revealed next week. Just in relation to that, and actually just reflecting back on Councillor Goodman, former Councillor Goodman, who's obviously so interested in these proceedings that he's left, we are and have done all the way through the master plan, had a continuing engagement with other landlords who are letting commercial property in the city. And that's been a very positive engagement. We've brought the landlords into our discussions, so landlords such as St John's and other smaller landlords, and that's been quite an effective discussion forum. Elsewhere in the economic development portfolio, I'm sure all members will have seen that final snagging issues around the High Street scheme in Keynsham are being dealt with. There are some small issues that need to be picked up, and those are being worked through at the moment. And I know Councillor Hale has been very active in raising those with me. But we are taking that seriously, and we have got solutions in train. We did very well recently with funding bids from WECA. A whole slew of bids for economic development were approved by WECA. I don't know the exact figure, but it's approaching £10 million. And one of those includes a RIF bid for the Fashion Museum, and I think that was 7.5 million that we were seeking. Also approved by WECA were 4 local high street projects which will benefit local shopping and retail centres. Those have also come through, and work will start on those. And the Riverline funding for the first phase has also been approved, and that will start in the summer this year. And not connected to WECA, but the York Street resurfacing works, that's been done very well. That should be finished in a week or 2. And I'm very pleased with the work that has been done there. It's really very high quality, and it'll be a big improvement to the centre of the city. We are working through the Summer Valley Enterprise Zone options. That will be heading towards the Cabinet in July. And there are various discussions going on with the stakeholder groups and others on that. So that's it, I think, Madam Chairman. I don't think I want to add anything. I won't say any more on property because we're going to discuss that under the item. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Right, thank you very much, Councillor Samuel. Does anybody on the panel have any questions for Councillor Hughes and then Councillor Dogood?
Thank you. Hi, Richard. I just have one question. Are you aware there's still some concern and outstanding issues regarding the Soma Valley design, and we still, as the key stakeholders group, still have some very serious concerns outstanding?
Well, I've read your email, Sean, so yes. I mean, I don't think we're completely there yet. There are still some issues to be ironed out. I thought the last meeting we had, 2 weeks ago, was pretty productive, but I see from correspondence since that there are still some things we need to iron out. So yeah, I acknowledge that, and I'm working on them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, two things, Councillor Samuel. Just although you're a few weeks away, presumably you're not expecting anything material to change from the 21-22 outturn. Just if you could comment on that. And the other thing that I just wanted to bring to your attention is that we will be looking at the risk register in more detail in the June-July meeting. I am increasingly, I think fellow members might think paranoid, but I'm just concerned about what happened at Gloucester City Council and the fact that when they did have a cyber attack before Christmas, they weren't insured. So I would ask you just to look, Andy Rothery isn't here today for understandable reasons, if you could just look at that element, because the amount of cyber fraud going on is about 50% of all UK fraud at the moment. It's growing, and with events in Eastern Europe, it may well go further. And I just think we really need to be on top of that particular threat on the risk register, and if you could particularly look as if we are insured for this issue.
Yeah, I mean, taking the outturn first, not expecting it to be dramatically different from the Q3 figures. I mean, at a very high level, spending on children's services continues to run over budget, and spending on adult social services continues to run under budget, and those two are tending to balance each other out. So I think the position reported in February is probably more or less where we will end up, but we'll have that report shortly. On the issue about cyber resilience, there is a provision in the budget for improvement to the resilience of our systems. And the person who's now in charge of IT is Jeff Ring, and I did discuss the whole question of resilience of our services, IT services, because their resilience is more important now than it ever was because of the amount of homeworking that is taking place. So we are very conscious about that. There is additional resource in the budget this year to beef up our IT resilience, and the point you've made about cybersecurity is included in that.
Does anybody else on the panel have any questions? Councillor Samuel. I have one question, if I may. What sort of percentage are we talking about for adult social care and children's services as a percentage of the overall costs? Because it was nudging up to about 81% a couple of years ago.
The overall... what I thought you were going to ask me was what was the under and over on those two services, which is roughly 2 million. 2 million over on children's and 2 million under on adults. As a proportion of the council's total budget, it will not have changed significantly. So you're still in the 78 to 82% range.
Thank you for that. Any questions? Any other questions? Right. Great. Then we will move on to item 9, which is the Strategic Performance Indicators Q3 Review, which Steve Harmon is going to introduce to you.
Thank you, Chair.
Just to set a little bit of context,
Yes,
we had a bit of a debate whether it was 220 indicators or it had gone up to 260-ish. So we're looking at trying to whittle those down to a meaningful but a handful of KPIs. So thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, for those members that don't know me, I'm Steve Harmon. I'm the Head of Corporate Governance and responsible for corporate performance across the Council. I'll give you a little bit of context about this report and then happy to answer any questions, obviously. Back in the autumn of last year, you will recall I did bring a demonstration of the Council's integrated reporting framework to members to show you how we collect, report and monitor on key performance indicators. As the Chair has already said, we have about 260 key indicators in that system at the moment across the wide range of Council services. And we work with our directors to make sure those are updated on a regular basis. We've whittled those down into a key basket of around 22 indicators, which we now report on a quarterly basis to Cabinet. And over the last period, we've reported 3 quarterly performance reports. The last report was put in front of Cabinet for quarter 3 on the 10th of February this year, and that is the report you have in front of you. The Chair and Vice Chair of this panel has asked me to bring this report to you so you could start looking actually at the performance of the Council rather than our processes and on how we monitor performance. Although I'm actually responsible for coordinating performance across the Council, I'm not a subject specialist in all of these areas, so I will do my best to answer some of these questions, and I'm quite happy to take them back to the lead officers and directors responsible for the services if I can't answer the question myself. This is your opportunity as a panel to feed back to the Cabinet and to Councillor Samuel on the basket as we currently have them, the 22 indicators, and this is your opportunity to ask any specific performance-related questions, and I'm quite happy to take any questions now.
Councillor Singleton.
Thank you very much. And it's great to see this developing. I'm a great believer in performance indicators of this sort, and I think this programme is coming along nicely. When you've been here previously a couple of times and you comment about the autumn, we have asked on at least 2 occasions whether we could have some input into seeing what the performance indicators were. And it's very difficult, given the invitation in your report that we might help shape the basket of indicators that come forward. We can't do that without actually seeing what indicators there are out there, because there are, you say, a list of 260 something. It would be very, very helpful, I think, if we could have that, and that might help us come up with some suggestions as to others that we might like to see. Because 1 or 2 of the ones we're being shown, I'm not certain how useful they are, although I'm sure they've been chosen by specialists for a reason. For example, the number of trees planted against a target of 100,000 is only given as the number of trees planted on council land, as opposed to the number of trees planted across the district. So that would strike me as being not a precisely good measure for that particular target. And on my own particular area of interest, I noticed that in 7.1 that the review of service delivery on climate and ecological emergencies, that the indicators are just being brought together. I would find it really valuable to have an opportunity to see that before they're cast in stone, because it is one of these areas where it is really easy to come up with targets which aren't really targets and avoid the tough ones. And I think that if this system is to be seen to be robust and seen to be effective, that it needs to stand up to scrutiny, it needs to stand up to involvement in shaping it. And I think that a really brave thing to do would be to allow this panel perhaps to ask which indicators it would like to see before a meeting, rather than having a basket presented to us, which to me looks a little bit like being allowed to write my own exam paper at some stage. But overall, a really positive initiative, but would love to see it come forward in a slightly more developed way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Singleton. A couple of responses to that. 260 indicators. If I put them in front of you today, it would take up all of your panel's time to go through them all, and plus a lot more time. The officers work with the portfolio cabinet members to choose the basket that we've currently got, but I can email you separately a list of those indicators, if you would find it useful. It would take me a while to bring them all together because I have to download them from the system, but that is possible. In terms of the climate and ecological ones, they have been developed by Sophie Broadfield and her teams when they're looking at the Climate and Ecological Action Plan. And again, I can send you a list of the ones we've currently got in that area, because we have a separate section within the Integrated Performance Reporting Framework with all of those indicators available.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. And yes, just seeing a list of the indicators would be perfect as a start. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions for the officer? Councillor Hodge and then Councillor Dogood. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Steve. It's really interesting to have a look at this data, and I just had a couple of specific ones on two of the items, and one general point actually to do with the access along the bottom. It does make quite a difference interpreting what's there, and I don't know whether it's possible to kind of emphasise the lower access, because some of the data relates to less than a year, and then some is over 5 or even 10 years. So it's really important to see it in that light. And then the two I had to query was the reablement service, the percentage of adults at home 91 days after the reablement service. So you're showing 2018 to 2021, so it's about 3 years data, isn't it, just about? And there's a sudden drop away from the target. So it's been really constant, bubbling around 80%, 85% near the target, and then more recently it's only 64%, which kind of just leaps out as a kind of big change over a small period of time. And then the other one, I just wanted to be sure what the implication with the adult safeguarding, the percentage of inquiries where the risk was removed or reduced, and it's down at 80%, so yes, the percentage of inquiries is 80%. What does it mean in practical terms that 20%, for 20% of inquiries, that risk wasn't reduced? Because again, over the time period, it has mostly been higher than 80% if you look at the scale. So what does it mean that for 20% of inquiries, the risk isn't removed for the...
Councillor Hodge, sorry if I may, Steve Harmon isn't an expert in these areas, so we may have to go back
Yes, I appreciate
to the director and ask for clarification around that.
Yeah,
so if we could do that.
I will, thank you, Councillor Hodge, for those questions. The first thing around the access, it's a difficult balance because we are trying to do everything online now with an automated system. If I had the system live in front of you, you would see the access and it would be easier. I totally acknowledge it doesn't come out as well as it should on a paper written report. We will look into that for you. Yeah, and the two specific questions around adults, I will take those back and speak to Suzanne Westhead and get a response and email those over to you in the next couple of days. Okay.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dogood?
Yeah, well done, Steve, for championing this and getting it off the ground and making real progress. So congratulations on that. And I echo Councillor Singleton's remarks that it's a good start. I'm a great fan of infographics and the MATs, etc. I noticed that some of the dates are 31st of December 21, and obviously we're in April 21, so I wouldn't expect the end of March. I know we're not quite that yet. We will be, I'm sure under your championship, we will be in a future date. But I also noticed some of the other stuff was various dates in 2020. And that worried me. I mean, A, it would be good if it was consistent in all the 31st of December. But secondly, it perhaps demonstrated that management were looking at data that was 6, 9, maybe even 12 months old. And that slightly worried me if that was a key KPI, because it's a bit out of date by its very definition. So just wanted you to comment on that, please.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, very valid points, and I can explain those. In terms of infographics, when we do the Q4 report to Cabinet around June time, we are going to do an infographic annex to that report to try and bring some of this stuff a bit more alive, to make it a bit more interesting, because I do acknowledge that just tables and narrative, aren't the most interesting things to read. So taking that point on board. In terms of the indicators and the dates, this is a problem we've had with indicators, and everybody in the public sector and the private sector to a certain degree will have this problem. A lot of the indicators we collect are annual indicators. So we only collect them once a year, because the information is only available once a year. A good example there are the 2 indicators about the resident survey. Now those indicators there are based on the 2020 survey, when that was done in November 2020. We've just completed the November 2021 survey, so when we do the Q4 report, we've just had the information back from our research team. We will update those with the figures for that. The same with the transport average road speeds, etc. Where, unfortunately, we are reliant on information from other parties to collect some of these indicators, and a lot of them are annual indicators, and if we only collect them once a year, every quarter I report on them, unfortunately you will get the same data until we reach that stage the following year where we've collected them again. Wherever possible, we do try and use quarterly or monthly indicators, but that's not always possible just due to the nature of the information we're collecting.
Great. Councillor Davis and then Councillor Hansel.
Thank you. This might be when you need to come back with the children on education and healthcare plans. We clearly, we know they're going up, and we've got 1,714 because the number is increasing. But how does that compare to the number that are actually wanted to be assessed or being assessed proportion-wise? Because numbers can go up, but is that proportionally increasing? Is there a way in which that can also sort of be fed into it?
Again, thank you for the question, and I will follow that with Chris Wilford and get back to you with an answer to that one.
Great, thank you. Councillor Hansel, you had a question.
Thank you. It's not so much a question, but a couple of quick comments. This is my first time on the committee. Just to say, you made a comment about having so many indicators, if you provided all the information, how boring it would be, and a lot to cope with. But let the members of the committee deal with that. It's very important that all data that's available is readily accessed by the committee who can study it and might be able to find trends and anomalies and so on that perhaps haven't occurred to others. So do share all the boring stuff. And just one other comment that I'm sure that you and others in the room are aware of a small number of councils around the country that have if you like, special measures, and chief executives having to leave, and they're in a desperate financial state with government people government appointed people coming in to take charge, and the important thing to note about that is often that's taken everybody by surprise, and the point of a scrutiny panel is to make sure that those sorts of situations never happen here. So just to emphasize how important it is that the performance indicators are clear, robust, and that very careful attention is paid to the data. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hansel. Would you like to respond?
Yeah, can I just respond to that? Thank you for the comments. I'll take those on board. What I can say is, although we have a couple of hundred indicators in the IRF, although they're not put in front of members, directors, heads of service, they are updated regularly, and they are discussed with the Cabinet portfolio members as part of their day-to-day activity. So most of the indicators we use to manage the organisation, even though they're not put in front of members as such. So, we are quite confident we won't get any surprises. And I think if you read the latest Ofsted report, which has just been published yesterday, there's my team are responsible for the data in children's services. There is a very good paragraph in there which basically Ofsted are congratulating us on our performance indicators and our data in children's services. So I take note of your comments, but be rest assured, we do look at them in some detail.
Lovely, thank you very much. You had a
Just
comment?
one comment. I'm sure that the arrangements that you've just described with senior managers dealing with cabinet members occurred in the other authorities that I've just alluded to. So that's why it's very important that there is clear independent scrutiny from the scrutiny panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hansel. Councillor Hughes, and then Councillor Hodge. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a very quick question. I'm just looking at the numbers that the statistics you've given us here, and they're all Bath and North East Somersets. Do these numbers break down into Bath and North East Somersets? Because they're two very different regions and would get very different results from these types of statistics, particularly on things like resident satisfaction, speed on roads. All of these numbers would be very different between the two areas.
The simple answer is some do and some don't. is the honest answer, and you know that is a potential problem that we are aware of. But unfortunately, most of the information we collect, we only collect it at Baines level.
So if we saw the full list of 220, then we 260 was it? Okay.
Can we stop saying that, because it does change? It may be 220, it may be 260. I haven't looked at the latest list. So around 200-ish, I would like to say. But you know, some of them could be aggregated down, but the vast majority probably won't be able to.
So it's that number 260. Would that include some subsections to these headline numbers?
Possibly, yes.
Possibly. Okay.
Okay. I don't keep all 260 in my head, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Hodge, did you?
Yeah, so it's just another detail on Steve. Just the Department of Transport average speed on roads. I mean, it seems to me a particularly not very helpful kind of indicator at all, really. And I presume it's in there because it's the Department of Transport asks you to collect this information in that way. I just wonder if it's worth including, you know, to show that a higher speed is less congestion seems so meaningless to me, really. But just so that we really understand it, where do you get that information from? Is it how do you get those average? Is it mostly on? Is there a distribution of 20-mile-an-hour roads, or is it monitoring on a particular day, or is it mostly roads that can be driven on at 60 miles an hour, so that it's shifted in that way?
The honest answer is I will have to go away and check. Again, I think, on my memory of looking at this, we do spot checks on a particular period in time, but I don't want to give you a false information. I will go away, check with the transport guys and get back to you.
That's great, thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions before we move on to the next item? No? Lovely. Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you, Chair.
Appreciate you coming along. Right, can we now move to item number 10, the commercial property estate. I don't know which of you are going to be speaking, so it's going to be Simon Martin speaking. If you'd like to introduce yourself, that'd be great. Thanks, Simon.
I think I'm going to introduce this first.
Yep.
Well, the first thing I want to say to the panel is you could be seriously misled by Mr. Goodman's comments at the beginning of the meeting, none of which were true. The correct position is that in the period that he described, between 2015 and 2019, the council was withdrawing money from the property estate and not putting enough money back into it in terms of investment and staff resources. And what that resulted in, when the Liberal Democrats took control of the council in 2019, was a situation where there were large numbers of difficult-to-let properties because they had not been repaired properly. Something I've rehearsed with this panel before, the need for regular inspection and investment planning regimes was simply not there, not because of any fault in the property service, but because councillors had taken the decision to disinvest. So that's the blunt truth. And so when Mr. Goodman talks about reports and things, I think the panel needs to realise that actually there is a long history to this, and it's not always a very happy one. Before we go into this is an update report, but before I want to go into that, I just wanted to remind everybody of the context. Since 2019, we have appointed a new chief executive, we have a new senior management team, we have revised the medium-term financial strategy to place more resources into investment and less assumptions about income that can be made from the commercial estate. And of course, in that 3-year period, we have also had the pandemic to deal with all the issues it's created, support to our tenants, dealing with tenants whose businesses have folded, and all the issues that creates in terms of ending leases and so on. Now, one thing Mr. Goodman was very wrong about was there has indeed been an independent review, and you're all aware of that, because we commissioned Montague Evans, as you know, to carry out that independent review, and they reported, and the recommendations that they came forward with are all in the process of being implemented or have been implemented. But it comes back to the fundamental thing, that if you want to have an effective, functioning corporate commercial property asset base, you have to invest in it. You cannot take money out and not put money back in. We have very old stock. Most of it is Georgian or Victorian. It requires maintenance, and you have to be on top of it. And market conditions now are so tough that tenants can easily go to other landlords who are doing that. So I think that's really important to remember. We'll come on to what is happening, but it is not at all as was described to you in that public statement, which is fundamentally incorrect. And we'll go on to demonstrate that as we go through. The last thing I'd say is that, of course, we all want the commercial estate to raise income for the council because that funds our services. But we have to do it in a balanced way. We mustn't over-assume what income we will get, and we must be prepared to invest in it. And I hope future administrations in this council will agree that that is the best approach. The commercial estate is not a cash cow to be drawn on constantly to prop up the council's finances. It has to stand alone, it has to function properly, and if it does so, it will reward the council with good returns. So I think that's really important to emphasise. I think that's probably quite a good point to go to Simon to pick up what is happening in terms of the way we're continuing to reorganise the service and make it more effective. So hopefully, Simon, that's reasonably seamless.
Thank you, Councillor Samuel. And by way of introduction, I'm Simon Martin. I'm the Director for Regeneration and Housing within the Council. I'm standing in for Andy, who is at very short notice taking himself home self-isolating. So please bear with me. But as Richard said, we have gone through a significant, and the starting position for our commercial estate was the Montague Evans work, which was shared, and the senior management restructure that commenced in 2021, which really set out to align our functional capability in terms of commercial estate to delivery to enable outcomes that are much more closely linked to a mission around improving people's lives. And that's enabled us to position the commercial estate much more within the council's finance portfolio, under Andy as the Chief Financial Officer, and create that alignment to utilise the commercial asset much more successfully to contribute income sources that, as we say, support the council's operating costs. And just by way of Andy's new structure, Andy's service structure under the Chief Financial Officer now includes that Head of Commercial Estate role, which Richard has taken up posting from the 1st of April, which covers off the kind of commercial estate functions really around the management of the estate, tenant and financial management, particular emphasis on future business planning around the asset base we hold, and also around the compliance and energy management, as Richard outlined. You know, we have a historic estate, largely, We have to address climate emergency. We have to invest in that estate for minimum energy efficiency standards. So all of that work now is very much focused under Richard's leadership around a commercial estate function. And alongside that, we've established a governance arrangement where regular property review boards, and if you recall, this was one of the recommendations of the Montague Evans report, was to set up that governance and support member decision-making around the four functions of asset management, the data and finance element, the strategic piece around managing our asset more strategically to ensure we have a much more balanced and resilient estate, and then the review process. I think that's the point I will hand over to Richard to give a bit of an update and information on the sort of market and the performance of the estate since we last reported to you.
Thank you, Simon. As Simon said, Richard Long, I'm head of the commercial estate. COVID and the economic uncertainties it created had an unprecedented impact on the commercial property market. However, it's important to note that rental values had already begun to decline up to 18 months before the outbreak of COVID. That trend simply accelerated sharply with the onset of the pandemic. However, that rate of decline has now moderated. Like rental markets nationally, Bath and retail in particular has felt the consequences. And the overall effect of the rebasing of rental values has seen reduction of 30 to 40% on pre-COVID rents. We are, though, seeing strong interest in the market, and whilst numerous large chains have either reduced their holdings, gone online, or actually gone out of business, we are now seeing new entrants to the market, and in particular, those in the independent sector. New slide, please. The graphs on this slide are taken from the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors Q4 commercial property indices, and they illustrate the performance of rental value broken down by the various sectors of office, industrial, retail, up to 2020. It's clear that the rental values within the retail sector, have been impacted by far greater degree than any other sector, and the decline follows the trend experienced here in Bath. Next slide, please. To mitigate these impacts, we adopted three immediate key priorities: to focus on the continuing reduction in rental arrears, to continue the focus on new lettings of the vacant units, and to continue to deliver a 3-year programme of capital works to enable vacant properties that required works to be brought back into commercial use in the shortest period of time. Having commenced during the middle of the last year, the programme has a total value of £3 million. Next slide, please. During the year 2021 to 22, the team achieved 32 new lettings with a rental value of £630,000. 16 units are currently under offer and are with solicitors to prepare the documentation, and these have a total rental value of £373,000. And we have another where we've just received an offer at £25,000 per annum. So altogether, that comes to a total of 49 units with an annual rental value of just over £1 million. After all incentives for fitting out have been ended. We currently have a further 9 units on the market. Next slide, please. The estates team took back responsibility for the management of income recovery in April 2021, and at that time the total arrears stood at £8.9 million. Through direct engagement with tenants and active management of the debt, despite the restricted measures permitted by the temporary legislation, the level of debt was reduced to £4.4 million by April this year, seeing an overall reduction in arrears of 51%, equating to £4.5 million. The target is to reduce this by a further £1.6 million over the next quarter. I should say this quarter, actually. The graph on this page provides a breakdown of the arrears of both current and previous tenants, where the tenants have either 1 quarter outstanding, or those with 2 or 3 quarters unpaid, and finally with debts of 4 quarters or more. Next slide, please. This slide sets out the priorities for the commercial estate over the following 12 months. The first is to restructure the way in which the property portfolio is held, as Simon was just explaining, by separating the management of the commercial estate from the management of the operational estate. This will enable the management, resourcing, expertise and objectives to be tailored to the differing requirements and aims of each estate. An annual business plan will be produced to enable the commercial estate to be driven forward under its own agenda with targets to measure its performance. A team dedicated to the management of the commercial estate will be assembled with the existing expertise to address the specific needs and challenges of the portfolio. Excuse me. This team will also include dedicated accounting and legal functions, which have today run in parallel and alongside the team. A new data system will improve the visibility of performance across all assets and will assist in the identification of surplus and underperforming assets. And this will all lead to an updated strategy that will focus on the council holding a more balanced portfolio that produces a resilient, sustainable income. Next slide, please. In terms of a timeline, we're currently working on producing a structure that will help delivering these aims, and it's anticipated this will be in place and implemented over the summer months. During this time, we'll also be developing the elements necessary for the business plan. In the latter part of this year, attention will be given to producing the estate strategy, which will focus on tenant management together with the investment and income priorities. Next slide, please. And finally, it's critical that we also seek to mitigate the exposure to risks facing the retail sector and the commercial estate. These include the current economic situation with inflationary pressures, both for traders and customers alike, the continuing threat of terrorism and the changing trends in shopping, the ability to maintain a fully resourced team, together with the need for investment in the assets surrounding public realm. This is a challenging period for property, and as long as we seek to implement these measures outlined in this report, we should help to provide an estate which continues to produce a resilient income for the council to deliver its corporate aims and objectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard and Simon. Panel members, do you have any questions for the officers? Councillor Singleton.
Thank you, Richard, for that. Interested in the aged debtors report, particularly the almost £1 million of previous tenant debt over 12 months old. Do you have an assessment of how much of that will actually be bad debt, and at what stage do we recognise it as such?
Sorry, can you repeat the last sentence?
Yeah, well, at what stage do we recognise bad debt, rather than simply hold it on the books in the hope it'll be paid?
We have a team, an income recovery team, that constantly monitors debt, monitors the financial standing of all the debtors. And of the 4 million that's still outstanding, approximately 1 million of that is debt to be written off because the companies no longer exist. They are unfortunately companies that didn't make it through the last 18 months. And they make up the vast majority of that, well, on the slide, those previous tenants in the yellow sector. But we do constantly credit check and check with Companies House to ensure the status of those companies.
But approximately £1 million of that has gone?
Approximately. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else got any questions? Sorry, Sean. Yeah, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Hi. So I've got a couple of questions. I mean, I was interested to see in the reports, you mentioned that the decline was happening way before the COVID crisis hit. What do you think the main reasons for that was? Was that just down to market forces, or was that down to the high rents and issues with maintenance of the properties?
No, that was mainly in connection with the retail sector that was already in decline. The other sectors were more impacted directly by COVID, and obviously we've seen, as a result of COVID, the impact that's had on potentially office occupation. But no, I mean, that comment was directly around, or principally around, the effect of the changing trends in retailing on the the emergence of online retailing and the pressure that that's had on the retail sector.
Okay, thank you. And looking at the new lettings achieved, it seems that we're talking about average rents of around about the 20,000 mark.
It's difficult. I mean, you can't really average it in that simple way. Well,
I can. There's 32 properties and £630,000.
They're a mixture of many of those those lettings were Milsom Street. Interestingly, the majority of the voids were around the Milsom Quarter focal point. Many of the units within the tertiary and secondary areas, where they did become void, were quickly let even during COVID. And so it is primarily in the retail spine that we are seeing the majority of the vacancies. So they're spread of large units at £100,000 rents through to, one of the recent lettings was moving the HMV unit up into where the former Gap unit was. I'd like to tell you the rent, but I haven't got it on the top of my head. Down to a £25,000 unit on Walcott Street. So
if you're saying the lowest was a £25,000 unit, if you've got 32 units at 630,000, that would average 20. So
yeah, no, that's not the lowest units. This includes.
Okay. So what is the lowest rent within that range of?
I don't have that information to hand. I mean, within the estate, we have industrial units in Radstock, in Keynsham, that would be within that number, which are 5,000 a year.
And do you think we're now also going to see a rebalancing of our current tenants when their leases come for renewal? They'll also be looking for 30 to 40% reductions.
I think on the basis of, some are now, where the leases are being renewed, they are looking for those rebased rents. We are seeing, though, that the comparable evidence, which is the evidence of all recent lettings, there is a sharpening of inducements that are being offered by some of the other landlords. There is very, very moderate growth in rental values as well. But we will see tenants seeking reductions in their rent for a while.
Okay. Thank you. It's okay just to ask one other question. So I noticed in the report that we've got an awful lot of action based on the Montague Evans report. I'm not sure, we saw the report and it was only a 22-page report. It didn't seem to go into too much depth or detail of the issues and problems. How confident are you that all of this, the restructuring and all this based on that report is going to solve our problems?
I think the main areas of challenge were on those areas that we've targeted as part of the restructuring. And having, and we put it at the top for a very good reason, having a clear and distinct separation from the commercial and the operational functions will enable the team to be built around the dedicated need to address the challenges within the commercial estate.
Okay. I guess my main concern is that we didn't already know this, and a 22-page report that didn't go into a lot of detail has brought about all this action here, and we couldn't have figured any of this out beforehand. But thank you.
I think, Sean, just to add to that, there are some basic foundations that report recommended that we need to put back into place, particularly around our data quality, around our intelligence around the asset we hold, around the asset management aspects of understanding and balancing what is a very historic holding to what would be a much more commercially resilient and balanced estate. And there's some very strong basic building blocks we need to put in place that flow from that as principles that flow from the Montague Evans work that provide the foundations that to then probably become much more granular about the action that we take through the business planning. And I think the big key step forward is to move to a much more business planned approach to our estate management, than historically how we've managed it, which is very much as a sort of a holding asset, investing when we need to when tenants turn over, to, as you know, with the sort of through the pandemic, becoming much more active around the estate management aspect of providing a service to tenants that actually provides much more opportunity to capture a larger share of the market. And I think that was the basis and benefit of the Montague Evans work, which puts all those principles in place for us to build from. So I think we're pretty confident now that those base foundations are being delivered as part of that first phase of action plan, and some of the results of that are flowing through into some of the rebound in the performance of the estate.
Does anybody else? Councillor Hodge.
Yes, so I've just got some questions just about understanding the timescale and timeline for the kind of plan for the year ahead. So the different stages are about a month apart, and I just wanted to understand in kind of simple to understand terms what's actually involved: the structure planning, team engagement, structure design. What you're hoping, what the process will be there, and then the consultation. Who is that with over six weeks? Who are consulting?
The consultation relates to the creation of the new teams that we are creating both across my area and Simon's area with the corporate estate team as well. So the structural planning is putting the blocks in place, the building blocks. With the team engagement, we want to make this engage the team in helping us with this structural planning, which then should hopefully lead to the structural design ultimately of the organisational structure charts.
So is that set out in the kind of flow chart that you, I mean, is it beyond what was already been set out in these flow charts, the structure of the team and everything?
The ones on the screen.
Is another, the whole tiers coming down from that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Just for clarity, to answer your question, that the consultation relates to staff consultation for an HR process to restructure the team.
Okay.
It's not consultation about the service redesign. It's actually the specifics of HR staff consultation to restructure the posts, to reorganise the resources we've got into the types of post and types of role we'll need to manage the estate more effectively in the future.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, that does. Yeah, that's what I did. And just a final question: the risks you're identifying, the team capacity and recruitment. Are you anticipating some recruitment and having an adequate team capacity?
It's in the retain or the recruitment is we obviously people do move from time to time. And there is quite a strong competition in the market at the moment for surveyors, whether they're building surveyors, estate surveyors or QSs. And what we're saying there is we just need to ensure, as part of this process, we remain competitive as an employer to be able to attract the right people.
Okay, lovely, thank you.
I think to add to that as well, we have also got some succession planning issues. So we've got a very stable, long-standing team. And we are reaching that stage where a number of our key team members are reaching retirement age. So there's a succession planning piece about recruitment, which in the current property market introduces a risk of trying to attract new individuals into the council in a very kind of heated market. Yeah. So that's one of our key risks. And there are some key roles that will become vacant over the course of the next financial year where people retire out and the structure becomes less well-resourced perhaps than it is at the moment.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Dogood.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. I'm pleased to see impact of inflation number one on the list. And I was thinking that through when I read the report, and I was thinking, yes, it's a tough time to be a retailer because you've got passing on the supplier increases, you've got the hit on disposable income, the hourly rate's gone up from about £8.50 in March 2021 to £10.10 now in terms of pay, which double now, as they say in Yorkshire, but you know, it's moving that. So you've got a real perfect storm. So, I mean, it's really tough in retail. Plus, as you've alluded to, the changes in structure towards the online retailing. So can you just perhaps give us a bit more detail? I've got two questions, but this is the principal one. Just how you see the impact of inflation and what effect that particularly might have on the dynamic for Baines.
I think awareness that there will be an impact. We don't know how that's going to shape up until it starts to take effect on both retailers and customers. I think from our point of view as managers of the estate, we just need to be a lot more engaged with our tenants, or ensure we remain engaged with them. We tried to remain engaged with them throughout the whole of the COVID process. We introduced some financial tenants assistance that kept probably ensured that some of our tenants survived through the period. And I think we'll just have to simply revert back to where we were 18 months ago in terms of making sure that the team work closely with their assigned tenants and spot danger as soon as it emerges.
So one of the things you're highlighting there is that the relationship with the tenants is probably a lot tighter, a lot closer than it was 18 months ago, and that's one of the benefits, if there are any benefits of COVID, that's had to bring a different sort of relationship between the council and tenants.
It's brought about a number of changes. Firstly, the way we engage with tenants and work with tenants, but equally the structure of leases has substantially changed from tenants simply wanting to walk straight into a building that they would then take responsibility for alongside their own business, to now becoming more from the position that they want to focus on their business and leave the custody of the house or the building they're operating with their landlord. So there are structural changes that we're going to have to, we're actually bringing those in, as well as the way we work with our tenants as well.
Sean, that customer interface is key to it. Sorry, Councillor Dugan. We've opened the property hub in the town centre, in the city centre as well, and that's enabled us to have a much more engaged relationship with our tenants as customers, which has meant that we're much more accessible as an officer team, and to a degree that's one mitigation against that inflation, around providing that service to our tenants to make it more accessible to come and talk to us. And the property hub is actually starting to really pay dividends in that kind of visibility as a landlord within the city centre where our predominant estate is. I think the other thing that we need to be mindful of, and we're working very closely from the economic development and the commercial estate perspective, is the investment in the wider city as a destination, and considering the experience retailing aspects around the offer that the city provides from a cultural and heritage attraction and a visitor economy attraction, around transitioning to a more sort of sustainable model, which is supporting that retail economy as well. So I think, you know, we've been running the Love High Streets programme. I know we're running it down in Midsummer Norton and in Keynsham as well, but that's been hugely successful in engaging our tenants in activities sort of outside of their tenant environment within the streetscape, like the food festival, Great Bath Feast, which is all added to the offer. And I think one of the statistics on the Great Bath Feast was Milson Street had its highest footfall figure ever counted during that feast, which hugely supported the tenants in that area, driving footfall to the upper town. And as a result of that, Richard's picked up, and we've been able to develop that relationship with tenants, which has improved the lettability of some of our premises in the Milson Street area. So I think we've got to look at it as much more of a broader kind of mitigation to the risk of inflation around the offer the city provides, alongside the offer as a landlord we provide for the types of lease arrangement and types of property we can offer to the market.
Which is a great link to my second question. Well, we have a problem. We have a problem with the post office located where it is at the moment. The level of complaints must be catastrophic for the retailer involved. And I'm getting them complaints when I go on the door canvassing from people who don't even live in the city centre. I mean, it has created an opportunity for sub-post office that are out in like Moorland Road, for instance, and Coombe Down and where I live, and South Down and places like that. But the service is diabolical in comparison to what it was, to the extent that I'm sure that a lot of people who were coming in primarily to the post office, to the centre of Bath, are no longer doing that, and therefore not spending money in the rest of Bath, the multiplier effect. Is there anything we can do from a political or officer level to influence what is just a diabolical customer service at the moment? I mean, you know, that's being polite.
I think we could certainly work to understand. I mean, they're a leased provision now, a sublet within a commercial letting that's outside of our estate portfolio. I think understanding their lease terms, when they might exit that lease position around tenanting the WH Smith unit, and whether the council considers them as a future potential tenant within our estate, for example, might be something that we can do some intelligence on to think about as their lease break comes up within their tenancy. Do we as a landlord provide a good opportunity to provide that business with a better offering to the city? That might be something proactive we can do, but it's very difficult to influence. I mean, they're a commercial operator now, the post office, and it would be very difficult to influence their decision making outside of understanding the lease terms and what we could offer them as a better offer within the city through our estate. Richard, I don't know if you want to add to that? Whether you...
I don't think I could add much more to that now.
Right, thank you very much. I had a quick question, and I think you've probably wrapped it up in some of your previous answers, but sadly I think we will see some companies go to the wall, and obviously some of our commercial estate tenants. And I wondered if you had contingency and flexibility over the leases so that you might be able to accommodate pop-ups or, you know, those short-term leases, just to get some money in and to make sure that the cash flow's there.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, we have, during the pandemic, used some of our voids for pop-ups, for meanwhile uses, for window licenses, and we'll continue to do that. Yeah.
We also, Karen, we've also received COVID recovery funding through WECA that ran a programme of meanwhile uses within some of our vacant retail units, to the extent that some of those have then been brought back into beneficial use and fed back in through to longer letting. So the Cheap Street, is it 10 or 15 Cheap Street? 15 Cheap Street is a good example where we used it as a meanwhile use and ran a number of community activities in it to get it back into use. And that's then enabled that to come back into kind of more mainstream use. And we have some funding to continue that programme as a medium-term intervention across the city, and I think it's been really successful doing it. We've had some really good results where that's demonstrated that those short-term pop-ups have allowed businesses to come in, perhaps for a weekend even. So the property hub you can rent for the weekend as a pop-up shop, and businesses have found that really successful to get a toehold into the market where perhaps they haven't had the confidence to take a more mainstream letting, and we'll definitely be continuing that as a theme as we move forward within the estate.
And a supplementary, if I may. So have you got any way of actually monitoring that? So do any of the short-term tenants convert to longer-term? Do you have any stats around that? Or is it a bit too early?
We are, part of our funding and monitoring is to collect that data. I'm afraid I don't have it with me, but I probably can respond following the meeting with some of the data around what we monitor for that kind of performance indicator.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions for the officers? Thank you very much for that. I look forward to seeing some of those stats if you've got them. Great. Thanks very much. So we're going to go on to item number 11, Adl Business Plan. We are going to exclude the public, if I may, a number of items. And on the 9th of May, we will have customer contact strategy, customer complaints process, and emerging digital data. But that's to be confirmed, but that's on the plan at the moment. And then on the 11th of July, we have our Equality Improvement Plan, and we will have a meeting of the EDI Steering Committee late-ish May, so that will inform, hopefully, that plan. Procurement Policy Annual Update, that's always very interesting. And then we have our updated Corporate Risk Register. Then we do have some other items in the agenda, but not in the agenda, in the work plan, but they're not included in this due to the papers going out and the timings. So we do have some updates, but I've stuck to what we know at the moment, and the work panel. The workflow panel for us going forward, and this is what went out with the papers. So we know that we've just had a meeting, and this will be updated very, very shortly. In fact, I think Donna's got a copy of that already. So if everybody is in agreement, then we can. Sent it out as well to panel members. Yes, you did. You've got a copy of that. So. That should be in our next meeting to have a look at. Is that all right? Is everybody content? Good. Excellent. Thank you very much for attending, and thank you to our officer for her assistance. And I now close the meeting at 5 to 6. Thank you very much.